Hello, everybody. This is The Cloud Dream of the Nine by Kim Man-Jung. Chapter 2, A Glimpse of Chin Sea. The hermit Yang left the world while the mother and son remained and lived together. Already before So Yu, that is Song Jin, was in his teens, he manifested extraordinary attractiveness and ability. The governor of his county called him the marvelous lad and recommended him to the court, but So Yu, on account of his mother, declined all favors. When he was 15 or thereabouts, with his frank and handsome face, he was said to resemble Panak of ancient China. His physical strength, too, was unrivaled, and his skill in the classics and composition was excellent. In astronomy and geomancy he was well trained, while in military knowledge, such as tossing the spear and fencing with a short sword, he was indeed a great wonder. Nothing could stand before him. In his former existence he had been a man of refined tastes, so his mind was clear and his heart kindly disposed and liberal. He deftly solved the mysteries of life as one would split the bamboo. Different altogether was he from the common run of man. Said he one day to his mother, "When my father went up to heaven, he entrusted the reputation and honor of his home to me, and yet here we are so poor that you are compelled to toil and struggle. To live here like a mere watchdog or a turtle that drags its tail and makes no effort to rise in the world means that we shall be blotted out as a family. I shall never comfort your heart, and shall fail of the trust that my father has imposed in me. I hear just now that government examinations are to be held, and that they are open to any candidate of the empire. May I not leave you for a little and try my skill?" While, you see, his mother had no desire to restrain his good purpose on the part of her son, she feared for the long journey that he would have to take. However, since his spirit was awake and anxious to go, she gave her consent. Selling what few treasures she had, she provided means for the journey. He then bade her good-bye, and with a limping donkey and a little serving boy to accompany him, he set out on the way. The views of mountain and stream by which he passed were specially fine, and since the opening of the examination was still somewhat distant, he lingered as he went along, looking at points of interest and seeking out old landmarks and records. At a certain place, as he went by, he saw a neat and tidy house surrounded by a beautiful grove of shady willow trees. A blue line of smoke, like silken rolls unwinding, rose skyward. In a retired part of the enclosure he saw a picturesque pavilion with a beautifully kept approach. He slowed up his beast and went near to enjoy the prospect. The encircling boughs and leaves barely permitted him to make out through the shade a wonderful fairy world. So Yu pushed aside the intervening greenery and lingered for a time, unwilling to go. He sighed and said, "In our world of Cho there are many pretty groves, but none that I ever saw so lovely as this." He rapidly composed and wrote a poem which ran, "Willows hung like woven green, veiling all the in-between, planted by some fairy free, sheltering her and calling me. Willows greenest of the green, brushing by her silken screen, speak by every waving wand of an unseen fairy hand." When he had jotted this down, he sang it out with a rich, clear voice, the notes of which resounded like the clink of silver or the echoing tones of crystal. It was heard in the top story of the pavilion, where a beautiful maiden was having a midday siesta. She awoke with a start, pushed aside the armrest on which she leaned, and sat up. She then opened the embroidered shade and looked out through the painted railing here and there. Whence came the singing? Suddenly her eyes met those of So Yu, while her hair, like a tumbled cloud, rested soft and warm upon her temples. The long jade pin that held the plaits together had been pushed aside till it showed slantwise through her tresses. Her sleepy eyelids were still somewhat weighted, and her expression was as though she had just emerged from dreamland. Rouge and cosmetics had vanished under the unceremonious hand of sleep, and her natural beauty was unveiled, a beauty impossible to picture, and such as no painting had ever portrayed. The two looked at each other with a fixed and startled expression, but said not a word. So Yu had sent his boy ahead to order the affairs at the inn, and now he suddenly returned to announce that it had been done so. The maiden looked straight at So Yu for a moment, and then suddenly recollected herself, closed the blind, and disappeared from view. A suggestion of sweet fragrance was borne to him on the breeze. So Yu regretted at first that the boy had disturbed him by his announcement. Now that the blind had closed, it was as though 1,000 miles of the Yangtze had cut him off from all his expectations. So he went on his way, looking back at times to see, but the silken window was made fast and did not open again. He reached the inn with a sense of loss and homesickness upon him, and with his mind mixed and confused. The family name of the maiden was Chin, and her given name was Cha Bong. She was the daughter of a government commissioner, and had lost her mother early in life. No brothers or sisters had she ever had, and now she had attained to the age when girls do up their hair, but she was still unmarried. The commissioner had gone up to the capital on official business, and so the daughter was alone when she thus unexpectedly met the eyes of So Yu. His handsome face and manly bearing attracted her wonderfully. Hearing, too, the verses that he sang, she was carried away with admiration for his skill as a scholar, and thus she thought to herself, "The woman's lot in life is to follow her husband. Her glory or her shame, her experiences for the span of life are wrapped up in her lord and master." For this reason, Princess Tak Moon, although a widow, followed General Sa Ma. I am yet an unmarried girl, and dislike dreadfully to become my own go-between and propose marriage. But it is said that in ancient times courtiers chose their own king, so I shall make inquiry concerning this gentleman and find his name and place of residence. I must do so at once, and not wait till my father's return, for who knows whither he may have gone in the meantime, or where I may search for him in the 4 quarters of the earth. She unclasped a roll of satin paper, wrote a verse or two, and gave it to her nurse, saying, "Take this letter to the city guest hall, and give it to the gentleman who rode past here on the little donkey and sang the willow song as he went by. Let him know that my purpose is to find the one that is destined for me, and on whom I may depend. Know forsooth that this is a very important matter, and one that forbids your acting in a light or frivolous way. The gentleman is handsome as the gods, his eyebrows are like the loftiest touches of a picture, and his form among common men is like the phoenix among feathered fowls. See him now for yourself, and give him this letter." The nurse replied, "I shall be careful to do just as you have commanded, but what shall I say if your father should inquire later?" "I shall see to that myself," said Chin-Si, "so do not be anxious." The nurse then left, but returned again in a little to ask, "What shall I do if the gentleman's already married or engaged?" On hearing this, the maiden thought for a moment, and then replied, "If that unfortunately be so, I shall not object to becoming his secondary wife. He is young, but whether he is married or not, who can tell?" The nurse then went to the guest hall and asked for the gentleman who had sung the willow song. Just at that moment So Yu stepped out of the entrance into the court, and there he met the old dame who came bearing the message. He responded at once and said, "Your humble servant, madam, is responsible for the willow song. Why do you ask me?" When the nurse saw his handsome face, she no longer doubted his being the one in question, and softly said, "We cannot speak here." So Yu, wondering, led her into the guest-house, and when they were seated quietly, he asked why she had come. "Will your excellency," said she in answer, "please tell me where you sang the willow song?" So Yu replied, "I am from a far distant part of the country, and have come to the first time into the neighborhood of the capital. The beauty of it delights my soul. Today at noon, as I was passing along the main highway, I saw to the north of the road a little pavilion with a grove of green willows, exquisitely beautiful. I could not restrain my joy, and so wrote a verse or two which I sang. But why does your excellent ladyship ask concerning that?" The nurse replied, "Did your excellency meet anyone at that time, or come face to face with any stranger?" So Yu made answer, "Your servant came face to face with a beautiful fairy, who looked down upon him from the pavilion by the way. Her lovely features I see still, and the fragrance of her presence has filled the world." The nurse went on, "I shall speak directly to the point. The house you mention is the home of my master, Commissioner Chin, and the lady you refer to is his daughter. From childhood she has been pure of heart and gifted in mind and soul, with a wonderful talent for knowing people. She saw your excellency but once and for a moment, yet her desire is to entrust herself to you forever. But the commissioner is away from home in the capital, and he must needs return before any decision can be arrived at. Most important is the matter, however, and in the meantime your excellency may be far enough away, like the floating seaweed on the drift, or the autumn leaves in the wind that blows. Fearing she might never again find you, she has sent me to say that the destiny of life is the all-important subject, while the diffidence of the moment and the fear to speak of it are but a passing unpleasantness. Thus has she, contrary to good form in her bringing up, written this letter and ordered me, her old servant, to ask your excellent name and place of residence." When So Yu heard this, he was greatly interested, and his countenance showed. He thanked her and said, "My name is Yang So Yu, and my home is in the land of Chou. I am young and not yet married. Only my aged mother is alive, and while the marriage question is one that will need inquiry on the part of both our clans, still consent to the contract may be given once, even here and now. And so, for my part, I consent at once, and swear it by the long green hills of Huasan and the endless reaches of the Weishu River." The nurse, delighted at her success, took a letter from her sleeve and gave it to So Yu, who tore it open and found a poem which read, "Willows waving by the way bade my lord his course to stay. He, alas, has failed to ken, draws his whip and rides again." When So Yu read the verse and noted its brightness and freshness, he praised it, saying, "No ancient sage ever wrote more sweetly." Then he unrolled a sheet of watered paper and wrote his reply thus, "Willow catkins soft and dear, bid thy soul to never fear. Ever may they bind us true, you to me and me to you." The nurse received it, placed it in her bosom, and went out through the main gateway of the guest hall. But So Yu called her again, saying, "The young lady is a native of Qin, while I belong to Chou. Once we separate, 1,000 miles come between us. With hills and streams and the windings of the way, it will be difficult indeed to get messages back and forth. We have no go-between to make proof of our contract, so I would like to go by moonlight and see my lady's beautiful face. What think you? In her letter there is some such suggestion, is there not? Please ask her." The nurse consented, and on her return gave the message to the maiden. "Master Yang has sworn by the Lotus Hills and the long stretches of the river that he will be your companion. He praised your composition most highly and wrote a reply which I have brought you." She then handed it to the lady. The maiden received the letter, read it, and her face lighted up with joy. Again the nurse went on to say, "Master Yang has asked if it would be agreeable to you to have him come quietly by moonlight and write another message which you could enjoy together." Her answer was, "It's not good form for a young man and a young woman to meet before marriage. I'm promised to him, it is true, and that makes a difference. If we meet at night, however, it might cause unseemly rumor, and also my father would reprimand me for it. Let us wait till noon tomorrow and meet in the great hall and there seal our happy contract. Go and tell him, will you?" The nurse went once again to the inn and told the young master what had been said. He expressed his regret and made reply, "The lady's pure heart and right ordered words put me to shame." Several times he urged upon the nurse that there should be no failure in their plans, and so she left. While Master Yang slept in the guest-house, his thoughts were agitated and on the wing, so that he did not rest well. He got up and waited for the crowing of the cock, impatient at the length of the long spring night. Suddenly the morning star began to dawn and the awakening drums to beat. He called his boy and ordered him to feed the donkey. At this point, an unexpected inrush of mounted troops greeted the city with all the clamor that goes with an army rabble. Like a great river they went thundering by, hurrying in from the west. In fear, he hastily gathered up his effects and looked out into the street, where the whole place seemed filled with armed men and fleeing people. The confusion was indescribable. The earth rang with the thunders of it, while the wailing of the citizens shook the very sky. He asked someone standing by what it meant, and was told that it was the rebel Ryong, who had risen against the government and proclaimed himself emperor. His Majesty was away on a visit of inspection in Yangju, and so the whole capital was in a state of hopeless confusion, with the rebels everywhere robbing the homes of the people. And there was word, too, that they had locked the gates of the city so that no one could escape, and were enlisting by force, rich and poor, every man who could bear arms. Master Yang, in a state of fear and bewilderment, got hold of his boy and hastened away with the donkey toward the south mountain that stood just in front, hoping to hide himself among the rocks or in some cave. He looked up and saw on the highest peak a little thatched house that seemed to hang in the shadows of the clouds, with the voices of cranes echoing about it. Thinking it the home of some dweller in the city, he went to it, picking his way, when suddenly he was confronted by the Taoist genie, who, seated on his mat, saw the young man coming toward him. He got up, greeted him, and asked, "Are you making your escape from the confusion of the city, and are you indeed the son of the hermit Yang, who lived in Huaram County?" So Yu gave a sudden start of surprise, bowed low, broke into an expression of wonder, and said in reply, "I am indeed the son of the hermit Yang. Since the departure of my father, I have lived with my old mother. I am dull and slow of intellect, and have learned next to nothing, and yet, presumptuously thinking that I might have some chance to pass the examination, I came as far as Huayum while this rebellion blocked my way. I'm trying to make my escape. I entered these mountain recesses, and have been so fortunate as to meet your excellency. God has helped me to such a meeting, I know. I have not heard of my father for so long, and as time has gone by, my soul waits more impatiently than ever for news from him. As I hear your words, I am sure you have definite knowledge of him. I pray you, Lord of the Fairies, do not withhold anything, but give a son the greatest comfort that can come to him. In what height does my father dwell, please, and how is he in health?" The fairy master smiled and said in reply, "Your father and I have just had a game of draughts together at Chagok Mountain Peak, and only said goodbye a little time ago, but I cannot tell you where he has gone. His face has not changed a whit, nor his hair grown gray, so you need not be anxious about him." Yang replied in tears, saying, "I wish the noble teacher would help me just once to meet my father." But the master, smiling, replied, "The love between son and father is great, but still mortals and the genii are of two different orders. I should like to help you, but it is impossible. The hills where the genii live are distant, and they're 10 provinces wide and far-reaching, so that it's impossible to know just where your father dwells. Now that you are here, stay for a time, and when the way opens again, it will be all right for you to go." Though Yang heard that his father was well, still the fact that the teacher had no intention of bringing about a meeting beclouded his hopes. Tears rained from his eyes, and his soul was in deep distress. However, the holy man comforted him, saying, "To meet and to part is one of life's common experiences. Also to part and to meet again. Why do you cry over the inevitable?" Then Yang brushed the tears away, thanked him, and sat down. The teacher pointed to a harp hanging on the wall and asked, "Can you play that instrument?" Yang replied, "I have some ear for music, but have never had a teacher, and so do not have a practiced hand." The genie then had the harp brought, gave it to the Yang, and told him to try. Yang took it, placed it on his knees, and played a tune called "The Wind in the Pines." The teacher, delighted, said, "You have skill and are really worth teaching." He then took the harp himself and taught him, in succession, 4 different selections. The music of it was entrancing, and such as no mortal had ever listened to before. Yang was by nature a skilful hand at the harp, and had a well-trained mind, so that when he once caught the spirit of it, he was master of the mystery. The genie sage, seeing this, was delighted, brought out his jade flute, and after playing a tune, taught it to Yang, saying, "Even among the ancients it was rare indeed that two should meet who are masters of music. Now I present this harp to you and this jade flute. You will find use for them later on. Guard them safely and remember what I have told you." Yang received them, bowed low, and spoke his thanks. "Your humble servant's good fortune is thus meeting the Lord of the Genii is due to my excellent father. He has led the way for me, and you are my father's friend. How could I serve you other than as I serve him? I long to devote my life to you as your disciple." The teacher smiled and said in reply, "The glory and honor of the world lie before you and are urging you on. There's no withstanding their power. It would never do for you to spend your time here in the hills with me. Your world differs from mine, and you are not intended for my disciple. Still, your earnest thought I shall remember, and I here present you with the book, Pang Cho Pang, in order that you may not forget my love for you. If you once master this law, though you may not attain to earthly immortality, still old age will be long deferred." Yang arose, bowed low, and received it, saying, "The great teacher has said that I am to enjoy riches and honor. I would like to ask about my other prospects. I've just decided to arrange marriage with the daughter of a gentleman of Hua County, but have been caught by this rebellion and compelled to fly for my life, without definitely deciding. Will this wedding turn out propitious or not?" The teacher laughed loudly, saying, "Marriage is a matter hidden in mystery, and one must not talk lightly of God's plans. Still, several beautiful women are destined for you, and so you have no need specially for this daughter of Hua. Yang knelt and received this word, and then went with the teacher to the guest room, where they spent the night. Before the day dawned, the genie awoke Yang and said, "The way is now clear for you to go, and the examination is postponed till the coming spring. Your mother will be anxiously waiting. Hasten back to her and quiet her faithful heart." He gave him also money for the way. Yang, after saying 100 thanks, set out on his journey, his harp with him, his flute, and his sacred book. As he left the place, the sadness of departure was borne in upon his heart, so that he turned to look back just once more. But already the house and the genie were gone, and only the day remained with the white clouds sailing by fresh and clean. When Yang entered the hills, the willows were in bloom, and the catkins not yet fallen, and now in a single night the chrysanthemums were all aglow. He asked concerning this, and he was told it was the 8th moon of autumn. He went to seek the inn where he had stayed, but it had passed through a war meanwhile, and was not the same at all. The whole world seemed changed, in fact. A great crowd of candidates was gathered, and he asked about the rebellion. They said that soldiers had been enlisted from all the provinces, and that the rebels had been put down, that the emperor had returned to the capital, and that the examination had been postponed till the next spring. Yang went to see the home of Commissioner Chin, but only the faded willows greeted him, as they trembled in the wind and frost. Not a trace was there left of its former beauty. The ornamented pavilion and the whitened walls were but dust and ashes. Stones, blackened with smoke, and broken tiles lay heaped in the vacated enclosure, while the surrounding village was all in ruins. There were no sounds of domestic life, no animals nor birds. Yang mourned over the transitory nature of life's affairs, and how a happy agreement had ended in desolation. He caught the willow branches in his hands, and turning toward the evening skies, sang over the willow song that the maiden Chin Si had written. His tears fell, and his heart was indescribably sad. There was no one from whom he could inquire concerning the catastrophe, and so he came back to the inn and asked of the innmaster, "Can you tell me what's become of the family of Commissioner Chin?" The innmaster twisted a wry face, saying, "Has not your excellency heard what became of them? The commissioner, it seems, went up to the capital on official business, while his daughter and servants remained at home. It turned out later, after peace was restored, that Chin had been in league with the rebels, and so he was arrested and beheaded. The daughter was taken to the capital. Some say that she too was condemned, some that she had become a yamen slave. Only this morning, seeing a crowd of prisoners passing the door, I asked who they were and where they were going, and was told that they were slaves bound for Yongnam, and somebody added that among them was Chen-Si, the commissioner's daughter. Yang heard this and was again cut deep with sorrow. He remarked, "The master of the South Hills said that marriage with Chen-Si would be like groping blindly in the night. She's dead, I suppose, and there will be no longer any possibility of inquiry." So he packed up his baggage and started for his native province. During this time, Yu Si, his mother, had heard of the war and of the attack made on the capital, and fearing lest her son should be in danger, she called on God with all her heart, and prayed till her face grew thin and her form poor and emaciated. It seemed as though she could not physically long endure it. Beholding her son return safe and sound, she clasped him to her bosom, and wept as for one who had been dead and come to life again, so transported was she with joy. In their talks together the fading year departed. Winter went its way, and the spring came round, and Yang once again made preparation for departure to attend the examination. Yu Si said, "Last year you experienced all sorts of dangers on your way, so that my soul still trembles as I think of it. You are young yet, and there is plenty of time for fame and fortune. Still, I must not forbid your going, as your wish is mine also. This Suju county is too narrow and isolated for a scholar's world. No one here is socially your equal, or with ability or bringing up sufficient for your companionship. You're now 18, and it is high time that you decide lest you lose life's fairest opportunity. In the Taoist Quan of the capital I have a cousin, the priestess Tu Rion. She has been a guide to the world of the fairy for many a year, and yet she is still alive. Her appearance is commanding, and her wisdom very great, I'm told. She is acquainted with all the noted families, too, and the nobility. If you give her a letter from me, she will treat you like a son, and will certainly assist you in the selection of your helpmate. Bear this in mind," said she, and wrote the letter. So Yu, hearing what his mother had said, told of his meeting with Chen-Si of Hua-Yum, and at once his face clouded over with sorrow. Yu Si sighed and said, "Even though Chen-Si was so beautiful, she was evidently not destined for you. It's unlikely that a child of such confusion and disaster could live. Even though she be not dead, it would be very difficult to find her. Leave off vain thoughts of her, I pray, and seek a wife elsewhere. Comfort your mother and do as she desires." The young man bade her farewell and started on his way. He reached Nakyang, and a sudden storm of rain overtaking him, he made his escape into a wine shop and stood outside the south gate, where he purchased a drink. He inquired of the master, saying, "This is fairly good wine, but have you no better?" The host said, "I have none other than this. If you desire the best, however, you'll find it sold at the inn at the head of the Chongjin Bridge. It's called Nakyang Springtime. 1 measure of it costs 1,000 cash. The flavor's very good indeed, but the price is high." Yang thought for a moment and said, "Nakyang has been the home of the emperor since ancient time, a very busy and splendid city, such as the world looks on as supreme. I went last year by another road, and so did not see its sights. I shall stop this time to look through it."